This week on Command Control Power, we are featuring a patron-only show for our supporters. If you're already subscribed on Patreon, you will find this week's show in your private podcast feed. To sign up and get instant access to special features like this one and several other recent patron-only episodes, go to commandcontrolpower.com and click on Support. For our general audience, we're featuring a classic episode from our catalog of nearly 500 episodes. We hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to Command Control Power with Joe, Jerry, Sam, and today we have a special guest, Luis Geraldo in Vancouver. Hey, Luis.
Hey there.
Thanks for being here. This is this all started when you made a post on the ACN alumni list, mentioning how, kind of just offhandedly, how you're almost exclusively managed services now, managed services model of offering your services. And you made a few references to that recently, and so we asked you to come on, and we're happy to have you here, and love to know more about that. But first, maybe you could tell us a little bit about sort of how you came to your current company, which is Ook Enterprises Limited. Is that correct?
That's right. Well, I think initially I had a consulting firm previously that was called Monkey Mac. And fairly early on, I found myself just maxing out on the number of hours I could work, and I grew immediately frustrated with that ceiling, seemingly, of how many hours I was able to work, and wasn't sure what kind of direction I needed to go in to get more leverage from my time. And so this is where the whole thought process began around, okay, how do I make more money for the same amount of work and not just work 20-hour days, which is where it was headed before. And so at that time, I was working with a client who had asked me to just do a quick audit of their network. They were working with a provider that was charging them what to me seemed an exorbitant amount of money at the time for some services that were not really up to snuff, and they had deployed a bunch of hardware on their network that was not cutting it and just causing a lot of problems. And I thought, okay, well, here's an opportunity to say my piece here. And I did, and the client just resonated with it. They thought, hey, we want to give you this monthly money instead. Is that okay with you? And I was like, well, I don't think I'd have a problem with that. And so my very first managed services client, if you will, sort of landed on my lap on a silver platter. And so I immediately had to shape up an SLA and figure out what it is that is included in my service contract, because their previous provider was a service provider as well, an Apple service provider, which meant that they were including all sorts of all-you-can-eat services like Mac repair, and everything was part of their contract. And I could obviously not offer a lot of those things. So I had to peel back on some of the things. I did lower the price a little, but it allowed me to just get into the mental space of how you build a managed services practice. And I'm not building by any means. I'm still on my own. So it's a small operation, but it just allowed me to change the mentality of this hourly billing to, hey, this is the amount of money we charge per month, and it includes these services. We don't bill by the hour, except for maybe the occasional project that they need as just a 2 or 3 hour thing. They say, okay, well, it's $125 an hour, what have you. But even larger projects, I try to figure out a fixed rate and provide a proposal for a fixed rate project. That removes the clock watching, removes a lot of the pressure to finish in a certain amount of time. If anything, it just allows me to be more useful with my own time and to say, hey, we're going to try and do this as quickly as possible. It's in everybody's benefit, and they seem to get that. From that consulting firm, I actually had an offer from a larger Windows-based MSP here in Vancouver that said, hey, we like what you're doing. We're kind of wondering if we should take on some Mac business. We have some clients using Mac, and they had been already subcontracting me for some of their Mac stuff. Sort of in a white label relationship. I'd put on their jacket, go and do some service, and submit the tickets to their system, and it was all very white label. And so, they approached me and said, we'd like to maybe look at merging our firms. And it was more of a buyout because they had a much more established firm, 40 staff, so much bigger operation. And so I thought, hey, this is great. I was at 4 employees at the time and thought I could skip over all this pain that I'm not necessarily willing to go through, of the growing pains of having to move out of being a technician and all of a sudden becoming an HR person. So I thought I could skip that and just move to a larger firm and do my work and just be part of a bigger thing. So I did that, and I lasted about a year simply because I realized, hey, I'm not cut from the cloth of the employee, as I probably feel most of us ACNs are.
Right.
And I decided to go back out on my own. Fortunately for me, I had a great relationship with the previous MSP, and we were able to part on really good terms. And in fact, they still send me lots of work, and they refer all their Mac stuff to me. Since then, we had hired some Mac people at their firm, but they've since left when I left, and so now they have no Mac people. So as a result, they send all their Mac referral work to me.
Well, that worked out for you pretty well.
Yeah, really. So you got you got a big windfall, and then you kind of walked away with the money, and they still don't have a Mac business.
Well, I actually bought back some of the stuff that I knew I'd still need, my Casper Suite licenses, things like that I just couldn't just buy everything new again because they didn't want to keep it and I'd need it again anyway. So It just made sense for me to buy back some of the assets. So it did work out though.
How about the clientele? Were you able, or did you want to take any of that clientele back with you?
Absolutely. In fact, that was part of my escape hatch plan was, hey, if this doesn't work out, my clients are my clients. They'll need to be able to decide on their own if they want to come back with me, and you guys can't prevent that. And it was okayed by them. They, in fact, had said, well, if you were to leave, we kind of wouldn't want those clients anyways because we wouldn't know what to do with the Mac stuff. And so it was all well and understood. And fortunately for me, all the clients were like, yeah, well, where are you going? We're following you because you're our guy. And, when you have a smaller practice and a much closer relationship with clients like that, they tend to be a little more attached. And so they all followed, which was really great.
That's excellent. I mean, you got the best of both worlds there.
Luis, with your current existing business or the one you're running right now with either Monkey Mac or your current consulting firm, when you have your typical managed service client, is that usually, in terms of the paperwork that manifests itself with setting them up, does that usually require you to, where they're signing off on services that you're going to guarantee that they provide? Because I think a lot of at least some of the ACNs here in the U.S. sort of deal with maybe like a single sheet of paper where you could have plan A, plan B, plan C. There might be something for the client to sign. And it's not vague, but it's a lot more informal. And there might be a handshake involved. And then all of a sudden you've got this client that you're providing managed service to, and if at any time it doesn't work out for them, they're really not that financially or contractually bound to you. Are most of yours like that, or are they a little bit more structured and you've got forms that maybe even you had an attorney look at and everybody's signing off on stuff for like a year contract?
Yeah, definitely structured. I think I've transitioned through a couple of different versions of that. And initially, when I went on my own, I had just left an Apple authorized reseller here in Vancouver. And so my initial clientele was just a bunch of home users for the most part. And that started to slowly grow into business users, or some of those home users had companies and, hey, can you look after our 5 staff at the office kind of thing. And so in that moment, a lot of my agreements were very casual. It was just sort of a consulting letter or consulting agreement. In fact, I have that posted on my website under the About link for anybody to view and see how that's structured. And that's mostly a blanket consulting agreement. I would almost have I pretty much have everybody sign that at first contact. And this was something that a lawyer helped me structure. And this is by no means any legal advice. That's my disclaimer. If somebody wants to check it out, please, by all means, do grab a copy of that. But please take it to a local law firm to have them look it over and make sure it works for your jurisdiction. So that's my disclaimer. And so
good disclaimer.
That was most of how I was set up, and it was just very handshakey in that sense. As soon as I started doing more of a managed services contract where there's a real expectation of availability from the client, I really knew I had to have an SLA and part of the contract that stipulates a lot of those things. So I did put one together, and I'd actually be more than happy to share it. Maybe I'll put up a link on the site with my template for that. And it's actually very basic. It just has the legal requirements of the client to pay for the services, and it outlines what our duties are. If the client should not pay, we're not required to provide service and that kind of thing, your basic legal stuff. But in terms of services or schedule of services, I've kept it fairly concise, and I try not to piecemeal plans or to offer a bronze, silver, gold type of thing, because it just creates complexity for me. And so I realized that either customers needed the whole package or just needed break fix service from time to time. And I still do a little bit of break fix, but I try to focus on the managed services relationships. And that schedule of services really outlines, okay, this is what we include. We'll provide all your software updates. We'll provide all your server updates. We'll provide this type of response time on this type of problem. The severity of issues will be discussed. This is what involves a critical issue. This is what involves emergency but not critical issue, and so on. So we go through the process of discussing with the client to make sure they understand how we catalog a severity. And that's ultimately what the SLA is about, and that's where the managed services fee really has value, is in the availability that we have to the client. At the same time, a lot of the services that are part of the value of my managed services agreement, I feel anyways, are the strategy that we provide to clients for their going forward type of approach to their own IT and their own business. And that's very loosey-goosey, because the reality is some clients will make the time to work on that strategy, and other clients, like on all small businesses, will sometimes be very short for time and just not have the ability to go and say, okay, we want to work on that strategy. We want to really look at our bottom line and compare how IT is providing any leverage for the business. And it's hard to find that in small business owners, but our duty is to try and encourage that, make sure that they are trying to budget for their IT, because I've not met a single small business under 50 users yet that had proactively been budgeting for their IT before we met them. And so those are little things that we can help them change without having a crazy SLA or technical focused work that allows them to see or gain a lot of value from the contract.
And are those things that seem to benefit you as well, like having a client, think about things in this way and think about their strategy and especially budgeting for IT?
Absolutely, because one of the things that we try to do is technology life cycles. I have a specific frame of mind around that, and so I like to think a server has a life cycle of 5 years, a workstation 3 years, a network device 5 to 7 years. It just depends, and so based on those ballpark life cycle numbers, we'll say, okay, but Mr. Client, you have X number of switches and routers and servers and workstations. This is how much it would cost to replace everything if you had one big expenditure. Would you like to spend this much money now, or would you like to start saving for it over the course of the next 5 years? And invariably the answer is, we'll start saving for it. And so that allows me to say, okay, the time is now for replacing these workstations that have come out of warranty. We can still get a little bit of money for them to resell them, and we can buy some new workstations. If you wait 2 more years, this will be worth zero, and now you're spending 30% more. And those are the kinds of little decisions that help the clients realize that they should be budgeting, that they should be planning for these life cycle moves and upgrading computers and that kind of thing. And so that thread on the ACN list was precisely that. The customer was on a really old computer and was just giving the consultant a hard time about upgrading. And so in my case, it's a line in the sand. I said, Mr. Customer, this is a machine that's out of warranty now, and as per contract, we will not service it as part of the contract. So if they want to keep their machines, then great, but we'll charge them extra if that machine fails and we have to go and rebuild it and that kind of thing.
That's pretty cool, actually. I mean, it's an interesting way of going about it. It also saves you digging into, especially since you have set costs, digging into a possible machine that's just not worth it and could be a waste of your time.
No, and we all know the types of issues that start to pop up after time. I mean, it's either a power supply fails or the logic board is starting to fail, and those are repairs that are in the $400 to $800 range for a machine that's worth $1,200. And so the cost to the client of having me even spend any time going backwards and forwards to try and figure out what the problem is not worth it once I put it in the correct frame of mind for them. And so at that point, they're like, okay, well, let's just replace that machine. I said, by the way, if you had replaced this machine a year ago, we would have been able to get $300 for it, and that would have been the warranty on the new one, for example. So it's just helping them switch that own frame of mind that they have, because I find that generally speaking, and consultants are this way as well, I'll allude to how my mentality was when I was a user consultant, but the mentality was, oh, Macs are great, they never break. If I'm doing a good job as a consultant, you just have to hire me once and you shouldn't need to call me for the next 3 years. And so that's great for, I don't know who, maybe the client, but certainly not a profitable business model for a consultant.
Sure.
Well, how do you respond to the client, though, just going on that thought for a moment, that says to you, oh, well, this is why I bought a Mac, because, when the salesperson sold me, my server and my client machines, that we talked about total cost of ownership. And this is why I didn't buy a PC. I mean, how do you, what's your short elevator speech for that? I mean,
I do get that a lot, and I think that's a very common question. The best answer I can give to that is technology is just technology. And so I think regardless of whether the Mac has a lower cost of maintenance or not, it's still using the same kind of hard drive that a PC has. It's still using the same kind of other parts and motherboard and chips and what have you that any other computer has. You're still just as likely as to drop a cup of coffee on your laptop, and there's no total cost of ownership that's going to save you there. And so when you're dealing with businesses, I find that the approach is a little bit different. A home user does not really attach risk to their computer, but a business does. And so and I don't want to come out as using this for fear-mongering by any stretch of the imagination, but a business needs to understand where there is risk in the business and how that can cost them. It's no secret that businesses that lose their IT and don't have backup will likely have a hard time recovering from it. And I've seen it happen where they lose all their data and it takes them months to come back from it and possibly even not come back at all. So I use the technique of just attaching the pain and the risk that there is in the business to what kind of tolerance they have. So I'll sit down with the potential client and say, okay, tell me about your server. What do you guys do with it? Okay, we share files. We access a database that we have with all our vendors. And okay, great. So how important is that database? Oh, we use it every day all the time. We couldn't live without it. Okay, so tell me what you would have to do if that server went down for 4 hours. Okay, well, 4 hours is kind of long. We'd probably have to send people home because they'd have nothing to do. Okay, so how much is 4 hours or 8 hours for that matter of your entire company's salary that works on that server? And at that point, they start to realize where I'm going with it, and they realize that the risk of even the server being down for 4 hours is way more costly than implementing that proper backup technique that was going to cost them $3,000 or $5,000 or what have you. And so that technique of just expanding on the risk and their business profitability structure with the client is very powerful. They finally get to understand, oh, I see. I had that exercise recently with a client where I said, you have a point-of-sale system. Tell me how long you could feasibly live without access to your point-of-sale system. And they said to me, 1 hour. And I said, okay, do you realize what kind of infrastructure is necessary to maintain your system so that there's never more than 1 hour of downtime? And they're like, well, no, tell me. I said, well, basically we have to keep a duplicate system off-site. We have to be able to change DNS records on the fly if this particular server were to fail, and so on and so on. Even just restoring data would take longer than 1 hour if that server failed. So we need to keep a live copy. Oh, how much is that going to cost? Well, it's going to cost about a tenth of how much it would cost you to send everybody home for a day. And that's a very, very different approach to that kind of conversation.
It's an interesting way to think about the business overall. There's a lot of sort of nuances here that don't apply to standard break fix work. Which I think has an appeal for a lot of people. A lot of people just starting out, especially. We bill for our time, and there's sort of an equal exchange there, where something goes wrong and then we charge to fix it. It's a really simple model, but when you go to something like a managed services agreement, you have all these things to consider, like how to ensure that you can work most efficiently, so if you don't mind, I want to kind of take a step back and look at it from that perspective. Like if you have a managed services if you have a break fix business model up and running and it's working well, what's the main sort of point, or what's the allure of going to a managed services model?
I think that, businesses that understand that the smooth running of their technology allows them to focus on what they do best is really the biggest value that they can get out of it. And there's a fine line, because I think there's a size of small business, maybe in the 3 to 8, maybe 8, 10 users, where you get the small business owners that are very hands-on and they like to experiment, and they go to the Apple Store and they get a little speech or presentation on how a Mac Mini server is going to be the ultimate thing that for their business. And, we all have gotten the call the next day from that business owner saying, hey, I bought this thing. It's supposed to do our mail and calendars and everything, and I can't even get past the installation screen.
So that's not just an East Coast thing then? That's also...
Yeah, I think it's the kind of worldly, but I think the main message to understand from that is that business owners that are technical clearly just are limited in even that technical capability, and will finally just give up and throw in the towel and say, okay, we actually have to spend more time getting customers for my business rather than spending this on creating or setting up a server. And I think that's the first opportunity where you get to create value for the customer. I say, okay, well, now, how many hours did you spend trying to figure it out? And the customer will easily have spent, anywhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 6 or 7 hours trying to figure it out before they finally give up and call somebody. And unless they have no appreciation for their own time, which is usually not the case, it's a really cool little pivot point where you can start to create value for the customer and say, okay, well, I just want you to understand what the value to your business is in a managed services approach is to make sure your business is running smoothly. And the customers who are always saying, hey, so what are we paying you for? My standard response to that is, you're paying to not have to see me. Is my standard response, and it kind of comes out as a quip, and they don't know if I'm insulting them or if it's serious. But it takes a moment before they realize, yeah, I think he's right. We want our business to run smoothly, and as long as things are running smoothly, and we don't have to bother you, we don't have to see you, this actually has value to us. Sometimes it takes one mishap for them to realize the value, and sometimes they know right off the bat. It's kind of the comparison I make is to whether or not you believe in buying insurance. And it's just, you have to be able to attach risk to the cost of the business.
So there's a benefit there in aligning basically everyone's interest. If you're selling your services on a monthly basis, and it's in your interest to keep things running so smoothly that you don't have to put in any extra time or make that urgent response call to some unforeseen issue, and the client obviously benefits from that as well, in addition to the monthly predictable expense. So is that sort of the main benefit of this model?
I'd say that that'd be short-sighted to think that that's the main benefit, because once one of my biggest gripes with the managed services industry is the people that promise, that they'll find problems before they happen and fix everything before it's a problem. I think that's always been a crock, in my opinion. And instead, what I'd like to do is do proactive planning with the customer and make sure that they understand where the risks to the business are. I'm not somebody who can, read the mind of a computer and say, I know that's going to fail. Some servers, like my own server, Windows server that I run here for some of my Windows-related stuff, has predictive failure messages. So I knew that a hard drive was going to fail before it failed. And so there are some things that we can use to leverage that, but I'd never promise to a client, I can fix every problem before it ever happens, because we know that's not ever going to hold up. But instead, I use the strategy piece of helping them understand how technology works for the business and where we can create for them some more value, whether it's productivity or training or helping them leverage technology to get that next big step to bigger clients or what have you. That's where the real value is. And I think including that as part of the managed services platform, which I've done, seems to generate the most value for my clients. Being able to get those calls and discuss, hey, we're looking at deploying iPads in our store. We want to be able to show our catalogs to our customers. And just having a more rounded conversation around that is useful to them, because now they know, okay, yeah, we go to Luis for everything. He helps us work through all the details of deploying this iPad solution, and it went smoothly, and it was great. And that's a lot of value to them.
So is that something that you're able to offer, sort of exclusively as part of the managed services contract, being a trusted advisor or a consultant per se, where they can call on you and sort of, call on you and spend as much time on the phone with you as they need to sort of discuss business strategy? Is that part of your offering?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to call out that the way you're asking this question just now kind of alludes to the idea of that my time is worth money. And it sort of goes back to whether you are able to let go the idea of hourly billing and really switch over to a value-based approach to delivering service. Okay, it's not about how many minutes I spend on the phone. It's about whether the customer finds that having that conversation with me is going to help them grow their business. And that has a much bigger price tag than the 25 minutes on the phone. So there's a number of books that whenever I talk to people about this very subject of value-based fees, I always mention this author, Alan Weiss, that's ALAN WEISS, and he's got a number of books in the App Store. And it's one is value-based fees, and another one is Consulting Bible, and a third one is $1 Million Proposals. Those three books are my reading for everything. And I find that the value-based fees approach is what will help people, consultants mainly, be able to switch their mentality from this hourly billing to a more value-based delivery.
Can you give us an idea, most of your clients, in terms of the number of people in their organization, what the range is roughly?
Yeah, so I have, for example, a medical clinic is a client of mine, and they have about 40 staff, and I manage about 35 computers there. Another one of my clients is a large retail store, and they have about 50 staff and about 30 workstations. Manufacturing facility, and they have maybe 10 staff, 10 computers. But these guys, for example, have entirely Windows-based infrastructure because they run an ERP that is Windows-based, and so their entire back end is Windows and their entire front end is Mac. And that's the growing scenario for me. A lot of customers really are requiring more Windows-based solutions. And I'm happier deploying Windows servers, to be honest with you, especially since they announced that 10.9 will go to native SMB. I'm like, okay, great. Now we won't have to spend money on Extreme Zip, but we'll have the ability to deploy Windows servers natively to Mac.
All right, I'm seeing that a lot too with anybody that needs kind of a more built infrastructure that we're seeing Windows backends, excuse me, and Macintosh front ends. Just to jump back for a second, I like to focus on your approach, which I really like, and I think the three of us also pride ourselves on, which is educating the customer a lot. And that's what I've heard time and time again in the half hour or so that we've been talking to you, is that you're really focusing on educating that client to make them understand why this is a good thing to do and a good way to go. And that is very key in how I like to explain things to my clients, and I'm sure Joe and Jerry do as well. And that part of the approach really intrigues me. And I think you make them understand why your services are needed and why they're good.
Yeah, I had. It wasn't always like that. I got to admit, in the very beginning, I wasn't even sure that I was worth it. And it's one of those things where I helped myself transition into, okay, what is the service I'm delivering? Am I delivering hours of time that I visit the customer, or am I delivering a solution and a betterment of the customer's environment and their life and their business and all these other things that have infinitely more value than just the dial on the clock? Mm-hmm. And that was what started to help me understand what the value in the service was. And I think it's just, I feel like Tony Robbins right now, but until one understands your own value, it's really hard to try and sell it to somebody else. And so for me, those things are a number of things added together. It's my black and white approach to licensing, for example. It's the fact that I don't allow customers to circumvent licensing and that kind of thing. That builds trust in ways that I can't put a price on. When a customer comes to me and say, hey, can we put that same license on these other computers? My immediate answer is no, and should you do that, you'll need to find someone else to work with. I know many consultants who would allow the customer, if there was risk of losing the customer, they would allow the customer to do that. And so things like that help build trust. It helps educate the customer. And I find that once I realized the value in what I was doing for them, they are a little bit more in tune with that as well. They see through, it's transparent, and they get it. It's finally like this big picture acknowledgement of, okay, we're actually hiring you to help us succeed in the long term and not just to come and re-image this Mac that failed. Mm-hmm. If I focus my work on that, I just wouldn't get out of just being an hourly based consultant.
Well, again, I'm looking just very quickly at the rates that you have listed on your website, and it's very clear in the message that you have here that these unmanaged hourly rates or half-day rates and full-day rates would scare most of my clients away, and so you have this very attractive managed service client rate, and so it's very pointed in what you're showing here that you want to draw them into that service. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to help clients understand about a managed service is that it's the ebb and flow. I sometimes it's very easy for them to understand, and if you give them a pointed example of a server failing and how much time it would take to fix that and so on, it'd be very, very evident to them right then and there that the value that they're getting from a single incident is way superior than this hourly rate. To give you an example, a server that fails, a hard drive that fails on a Mac Mini, that, guess what, has to go into the store because Mac Minis do not qualify for on-site service. So what that means is I have to somehow figure out a window of opportunity between the time that the client closes and the time that the Apple Store closes, try and get it there for service if they're going to replace a hard drive under warranty, and then magically get it back to the site the next day. Or to spend money on a second server and do that. No, so my point is add an hourly rate to that, and all of a sudden I've spent 10 to 16 hours getting this Mac Mini back from failure, and at an hourly rate of even $100, that's way more money than they would have spent on a monthly managed service. Now, they'll say, well, what if we don't need you the next month? I said, exactly. Then I'm doing my job. And all of a sudden, that realization starts to come
So what is the solution to that? Do you have a backup Mac Mini server, a loaner that you put in place for them until theirs is repaired, or do you actually have them purchase another one and it just falls under the umbrella of their managed service contract?
Yeah, so it just depends on what they're willing to do. So what what would you normally
do? Like, I'm just curious how you would solve that puzzle, because I've been in that same position at least 3 times.
So good. I'm describing something that's common. What I do in a situation like that is I've typically set up some kind of local clone to an external drive that runs nightly or every other night, or at least something that I will initiate a manual clone whenever there's major changes to the OS, a directory change, adding or removing users, that kind of thing. And so that allows me to quickly just pick up a Mac anywhere if that was the case. And the customer will, in that type of situation, will authorize anything. Okay, we can take this in. It'll take 2 days to get it back. Or I can buy a Mac Mini right now and restore from the clone, up to you. And so, they'll go buy the Mac Mini. There's never a question as to why they would have to spend that money.
Okay, so I just wanted to get, I didn't want you to spend too much time on this. So in this sort of like in your thought process here or in your business, it's not like you've got loaner machines ready to go online for a client in that position. It's like usually it's a special case and you walk the client through different possibilities to be operational within 8 hours.
Certainly
Got it.
not.
Okay.
But the main thing that I derive out of that is that I've had the conversation with the client where we've actually been very open about some of those risks. I say, okay, what happens if this server fails? And we actually have gone through this very same scenario in a very casual meeting when nothing has happened yet, right? And so that's the key for me is we've had that conversation way before anything happens. So when it does happen, they actually have a little bit of an expectation. They know what's going to happen. They know how I'm going to handle the situation. And it doesn't become sort of a finger-pointing scenario of like, hey, you install this for us, you better fix it, or otherwise, whatever. And that's just not useful for anybody. So when you have the opportunity to go through the exercise of discussing the risk and allowing them to decide whether they're okay with an 8-hour outage or a 48-hour outage for that matter, as opposed to spending the money on a cloned server or a warm spare or what have you, then the power is in their hands, really. And it's that transparency of that conversation that has really allowed me to wash my hands of the finger pointing. And it's a much more healthy relationship that way.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I have a quick question. In this talk about how you can help your clients be up and running quickly, and you can also deliver a Mac Mini server, do you have any kind of NOC or network operations center in your office and to allow for live clones off-site? And also, what do you use for your reporting tools to let you know that your client's hardware is becoming out of date when it comes to switches or servers or client machines?
Yeah, so on the Mac OS X side, I deploy Casper Suite to all the Macs, and so I have constant reporting of what every computer is and where the operating systems are. And so right now, for example, I'm doing a big push to get everybody updated to Mountain Lion. Now that we've kind of verified that the apps that everybody uses are compatible. But Casper Suite is really the tool that gives me the reporting I need on the Mac OS X side. As far as actual network monitoring, that kind of thing, I use Intermapper. I have VPN tunnels to every client's site from my office, and I use Intermapper on a local computer here that monitors every client's site remotely. So I pointed at network routers, switches, even printers, because it can tell me with SNMP messages whether it's running low on toner, and in some occasions for critical printers, I will monitor them to say, hey, you're running low on toner, you should probably order another cartridge. And they order it and they replace it. It's not a big deal, but at least they didn't get surprised by being out of toner and, we can't print the invoices and we have to close down the clinic kind of scenario. But I monitor with Intermapper. On the Windows side, I'm actually moving to a new product, most likely Navarisk is what it's called, which does a lot of that Windows monitoring, remote control, patching, all that stuff that's really not possible with Casper Suite on the Windows side of things.
Love it, man. You even tell people when they're out of toner. That's awesome.
Well, it's not a lot of work when you can stay on top of it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think, and there's a lot of benefit, and a lot of those things can be automated. I can say, hey, if this printer gives an alert that it's out of toner, send an email to this person, and they get the alerts, and they, is our printer really out of toner again? And they say, yeah, it's been printing a lot, and so they'll order the toner, and that's it. But those are just little things, and it's funny how those little things sometimes add up to the perception of good service. But
only the perception, though, not the
in the business owner's mind. Well, yeah, because if you ask the staff members if hey, is Luis good or whatever, they'll just refer to whatever the last interaction with me was. But if you ask a business owner if I'm good, it's really about the direction of the business and are they being successful and are they being productive, and the mentality is a little bit different.
And Intermap, I'm sorry, Joe, just a quick question about Intermapper. They have a Mac client that will run with their software?
Yeah, in fact, Intermapper is kind of all platform compatible. So you can run Intermapper on a Linux box or on a Windows server, and you have clients, or maybe not Windows, but definitely a Linux server, and you have clients for Mac, native clients for Mac under Windows and Linux. And it's great little software.
They used to have a deal for ACNs, didn't they, with Intermapper?
Yeah, they have I believe it may still be on there. They have an NFR for ACNs, and that's how I got into it. And we're still getting our NFRs, and we renew it, and so it hasn't cost us anything, but it's quite popular for monitoring. It's ugly, but it's very effective.
I remember I used to have those sound effects or something. I tested it out a while ago, but I can't remember.
I did turn those off on
did you?
first install. Yeah. I just have mine configured to send emails on alerts and events, and that's been more than sufficient. Even a lot of the predictive stuff is again very hard because hard drives won't really give an alert or anything until they've started to provide some kind of failure that is causing a problem for the user. Sometimes if it's on a server, the users may not really detect what the problem is. They just, the server's so slow today or whatever. But we have to take cues from users on those things and be a little more proactive.
I found that Softrate has a great sort of like litmus test for hard drives. It'll analyze the smart data, and based on I think Google's hard drive study, report when a drive is likely to fail or more likely to fail, in the next 3 months or so, something like that. But you have to have the Softrate driver installed. You don't have to have Softrate volumes, but you do have to have the Softrate driver installed. Be interesting to see an app that would do that and sort of monitor it remotely like that.
Yeah, I find that I've either been really lucky or I've just held my clients up to the standard that I set out for them a little too hard, and so I've found that I've knock on wood as I say this, I've not had any major outages. I've stayed on top of all the client servers and issues. Whenever there has been an issue, there's been some kind of way to mitigate the problem, or a spare server or what have you. And so I think I've been lucky in that sense, in that I haven't had to really figure out what would happen in the case of a dire situation. But my consolation is I've actually had the conversations with the clients, and should something like that happen, at least they know what to expect, and that it's not going to be this big question mark of, okay, what now? And this is, whose fault is this? Why is this happening? In that case, I don't have to be the guy that says, I told you so, which is horrible. Instead, I can be the guy, okay, let's learn from this. This is what we talked about a few months ago, and we could have done this, and are you ready to consider that option now? Or do you think now that you've had the problem, it's never going to happen again? It just starts to create an open channel of communication. Certainly on the tool side, I think I may have just posted what I was doing from a tool set standpoint, but Intermapper for monitoring, again, VPN tunnels to all client sites. They're either using Cisco gear for their network or Meraki stuff. I've been deploying lots of Meraki recently.
So you require them to basically purchase, some kind of VPN router up front so that you have remote access to their network.
Yeah, and I'm reasonable. If they have a really great hardware product, whether it's Juniper or SonicWall or what have you, unless it's really, really not suitable for their network, I won't force them to buy or replace it. And that's another thing that really gets me of the industry a lot, is consultants and or some companies really, really just focus on one type of product, and if the customer doesn't use that, they'll make them replace it. They'll make them pay for it. And then still not manage to provide a decent level of service around that. And so what I try to do is simply focus on, okay, the way that I need to provide service is I need to have the alerting in place, I need to have the monitoring in place, and so if I can create a VPN tunnel with the hardware you have, I'll make it happen. But let's look at this router. Okay, it's 5 years old. Guess what, Mr. Customer? This is 5 years old. Your license long expired. It's not under support. If this device failed, we'd have a hell of a time trying to get your network back up. Are you willing to go without internet for 2 days? No, we're not. Okay, great. Let's look at replacing it. And so those are, it's just a constant stream of that kind of conversation, which changes the approach.
Do you ever have a client say, yeah, no big deal if the internet goes down?
You know what? I do have some clients that are like that, and it's a result, I guess, of the trusted advisor. Finally, the light bulb has gone on and said, hey, Luis is not going to try to shaft us for money, or he's not going to try and rob us or try to sell us unnecessary gear. We trust him. We trust you completely. I've had customers tell that to my face, which is great. It's awesome validation of why there's value in the service. And case in point, I just emailed 3 customers yesterday. Hey guys, it's time to do that Mountain Lion upgrade. This is how much it's going to cost, a flat fee to upgrade X number of computers. I don't provide an hourly rate. I don't provide anything but a flat fee plus the cost of the licenses. And every single response was 3 words. It's like, go for it. And that's it. And so that really tells me I'm doing something right. The customer trusts what I'm saying. They don't have any qualms about doing what I recommend, and that's an awesome state.
I just want to circle back to the Mac Mini anecdote from earlier. It kind of serves to illustrate one of the main advantages here. Obviously, I'm stuck on this like pre-value-based fees thinking still, but one of the things that I've always considered when trying to come up with a managed services offering for my business, which is mostly break fix, hourly billing, is how to make it equitable for everybody. So how to make sure that I'm making the same amount of money or more, I hope, and working as efficiently, and the clients are also benefiting and also being charged equitably. And we can talk specifically on that. But the Mac Mini story illustrates this, because you mentioned how in a case like that, you may have to go to the Apple Store, and it may have to be in a very small window, and the Apple Store wants to keep the machine for a couple of days as they work on it. It leads to this downtime, and you have to go maybe back to the store once or twice, or certainly at least to pick it up and then return it to the client. And there's a lot of steps in that process that if you were to bill at your normal rate would be just astronomical. And so I find myself oftentimes waiving fees along the way, to keep the fees reasonable. And so if you're already waiving fees in situations like that, it starts to make the potential risk of offering managed services less, because while you may have something like this which you have to respond to and deal with without charging for it, because it's part of your standard SLA, you're already sort of waiving fees right and left anyway, and so it kind of brings those two scenarios closer together. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think I've been through that myself. I've had situations where I was doing a lot of running around, and in the beginning I didn't quite know how to handle that, and I would also waive things where I thought, okay, listen, I think to myself, I just helped this customer replace this failed computer, whatever, and I've spent 10 hours on it. I don't see how I could send them an invoice for $1,200 for a Mac Mini that costs $900. And so I felt awkward about it. And so the technique that I have for that kind of thing is instead of just jumping into action and doing it for the customer, and this is very specific to break fix, of course, I got to outline that, is I will tell the customer, I said, I'll send them a quick email, or I'll follow up with them. If they're calling in a panic, I'll say, let me send you a quick email outlining what we need to do, and then we can go from there. It'll be 5 minutes. And so, okay, I'll wait for your email. Great. So I send an email, and I'll tell the customer, okay, here's what you need to do if you want this repaired in the least amount of time for the least amount of money. Go ahead and disconnect the server, and I tell them what needs to be done. And if the customer does not see value in having somebody look after that, they'll go ahead and do it themselves. If they don't see value in doing that themselves, they'll be like, okay, you know what? I actually want you to handle it. And in that same email, I would have quoted a flat project rate to get this computer out of that state. Because we know what's required. But to the customer, the inconvenience of all that is worth a lot more than what they're going to end up paying us. And so what I find is that the technique of just allowing them the choice of doing it themselves or giving me a flat project rate to solve their entire problem is often a really good way to switch them into the mentality of value as opposed to hourly rate.
That's a good point. Giving them the option. I had a scenario recently where a point of sale client had their main workstation go down, needed to go into the Apple Store for repair. It was under warranty. So it was a matter of, shutting it down, giving them some other kind of, temporary solution in the meantime, or being without that system. And of course they had that option. They could just choose to shut down the store for a couple of days and bring it themselves, this big 27-inch iMac to the Apple Store, 3 towns over, and, go and pick it up and bring it back and, go through the rigmarole. So we we discussed that option, obviously the free option, and then compare that to, providing them with a loaner, cloning the system to the loaner and getting them back up and running temporarily after business hours so that they wouldn't lose any time at all. But I guess even in the scenario that they chose, which obviously was me, schlepping the thing to the Apple Store for them and whatnot.
I choose that too.
Yeah, exactly. It still involves, for me, it involved actually in that case, multiple trips to the Apple Store, proving to Apple what the problem was, and facilitating the repair under warranty. So it wasn't even just a standard, let me bring it in and it fails a smart test and they replace the drive. It was a logic board issue, which we had to, narrow down. And I had to basically prove to them what the issue was. So it took multiple trips. And of course, I didn't feel, comfortable charging for every time I drove to the Apple Store and back.
Yeah, and I think it's just against all natural, ways of the world to charge based on an hourly rate. It's just in this other book, $1 Million Proposals that I've been reading recently, they talk about that as just being the scum of the earth. Is hourly billing is the scum of the earth because there's just no way.
Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, really.
No, I don't mean it like that. And I certainly still do some hourly billing because, it's how a lot of the world still thinks about services and professional services. How much is your hourly rate? So I still have to provide a reasonable response and not just try and be philosophical every time a client asks a question. But I think the main thing that you really uncovered in this particular scenario is the choice factor. And I see way too many consultants that appropriate themselves of a client situation and then send the bill for all that time. And in all of this, the client may have not had much choice, right. But we're not given really participation in a decision-making process of saying, okay, these are the options. I feel as a consultant that the role should really be more of the guy that stands up in front in the face of a calamity and helps organize the troops. And in that, there is choice for the customer, and that's really what allows you to move forward with the customer. And when they make the choice of being you that handles the issue, they have really come a long way, and that's an opportunity to deliver value in terms of the end result and not so much in terms of the hourly rate.
Right. And also billing for service like that on a project basis, telling the client, look, it's going to take me this amount of time to clone the data, this amount of time to drive back and forth to the Apple Store, 2 or 3 times and return it to you and clone it back and whatnot. That's going to take this many hours. I'm willing to do it for this amount of money, flat rate. I think that's a good approach to that too. I like that idea.
Yeah, and I think it's always more difficult with failures where there's a very specific amount of time that things will take. I think you start to really, again, it's an ebb and flow. That may be a loss leader for you in the sense that in most cases, if you quote a flat fee for that, you may end up spending more time than you quoted. But still, it's the end result is the customer is happy. They had choice. They're pleased with the service, and that matters to me more than charging a whole bunch of money where they're like, we're going to find a cheaper guy. We didn't like this way. We didn't get any choice. The guy just handled everything, but we didn't know what was going on. That's a little bit tricky. But on the project side, when there's not a problem, and Mike Kingsley on the thread asked the question that even though I have mostly project rates, let me just see if I can see the question here.
You got to it first. I was going to bring it up.
Yeah.
So I have an hourly rate on my website, but like I mentioned in the podcast, I still mostly bill by the project, or is that just for managed services? Definitely not just for managed services. I think even a walk-in client, somebody that just calls off the Consultants Network website, I still have the opportunity to say, listen, you want to get from point A to point B. Tell me how much that is worth to your company in productivity, in gained results, or in the bottom line. Is it worth, $20,000 in gained productivity or what have you? Sometimes they're willing to have that conversation, and sometimes, no, we just want to know what your hourly rate is. I said, well, unfortunately, I don't really bill by the hour, but if you're looking to do this project, I can tell you that'll cost about this much. And so for projects where like it's deploying 50 new computers or re-imaging or doing an upgrade, we know that we can leverage tools to automate a lot of that process, and where we can build a little bit of headroom for ourselves and still charge a feasibly amount of money that is, if you were to calculate it hourly, would calculate to more money than it would actually take you to do the work if you use automation tools and if you use imaging tools and that kind of thing. So I think the main leverage for us is to find the tools that help us save time. And that's where you can get some of that time back. But as long as you're quoting hourly rates, it's going to take me 2 hours per computer to image 50 computers. Okay, that's 100 hours. They're not likely going to buy a $100,000 project from you to image a bunch of computers. But if you are able to automate that and say, this is a flat fee to do this much, and you can maybe make 5 or 6 hours back from that automation, then it's worthwhile for everybody.
Mike Kingsley in the chat room also brought up another point here that it seems like a few years ago, people seem to be against project rates because customers would sort of imagine that you're increasing the overall estimate to sort of fudge the numbers in case things get out of hand. And the interesting thing in the past year or so in our local market is that there's been some turnover. So we've all picked up a few clients, I think, from another consultancy in the local area that switched to almost exclusively a managed services pricing model. And some of their clients came to us. I can speak for myself in particular, specifically saying that they were not happy with that sort of model. They felt like they were being charged whether they needed services or not, whether everything was going well or not. And I guess maybe your response is, well, I don't want that kind of customer. If they think, as long as everything's okay, I don't want to pay you any money.
No, yeah. Let me interject there for a second. I think I view that as an opportunity to just help the customer understand the value of the service and the value proposition of what we do as consultants. I think when there's that kind of situation where customers just leave, either the consultant is not really delivering any kind of value to their service, and it's just literally a transactional type of relationship. Here's X dollars for this result. Or they're just not creating enough trust. The trust is really what enables your relationship to move forward with that kind of thing. And I find that whenever customers have been able to rely entirely on me without hesitation for a recommendation or what have you, they very, very seldomly transition away from the managed services model simply because they know it's looked after and it's handled. And I think that that's not for everybody. I will agree to that. And I think some customers just don't see the value in that. They're just too small. They just want to pay for when they have a little problem, and that's it. And so it's really hard for a guy that's trying to do a managed services model to charge $200 a month to a 2-user customer and pretend to make money from that, because it's just not going to happen. A single problem will be more, like getting to the customer site and back will be more money than they're paying a month for a single incident. So that's why whenever I talk about managed services, there's kind of a minimum number of user lower limit before it actually makes sense to the customer and it makes sense to the provider. And for me, that lower limit is around 15 staff. I find that any lower than 15 staff, I'm typically dealing with the techno crazies, the guys that love sticking their hands in everything technology and making a mess of it, or they just don't see enough value to have an ongoing relationship where there's strategy. They're not necessarily trying to grow their business. They're just sort of in this continuum of, we have 8 staff and that's it, and they would never see value in that. And so I think it's just a matter of finding a right fit.
So for the customers that do see the light, it comes back to trust and educating the client again. Every time.
I would say that it's never been anything but that in my case. Whenever I felt that there was a falling out from a trust perspective, I've immediately always been the first one to the table to say, listen, I feel like we've moved away from what I'd like our relationship to be. It seems like you've been questioning a lot of the things that we're doing over the last 2 or 3 months, and that's a sign that you just don't trust our relationship anymore. And I let them move on. I think that transparency just gives them the freedom of saying, okay, this guy was great, it was just not for us, and they'll go on to somebody that will just charge them by the hour if that's what they needed, or just a different type of personality. But I certainly don't pretend to want to be a fit for everyone, and I think that focus has helped me really hone in on the customers that are a good fit.
I mean, I think you also drove home the point that any less than 15, and it's it's a big number for a lot of these smaller organizations. And even if you don't have the guy who's the owner of the business and he likes to play around with the Mac Mini server on his own, I think you just have these small businesses that are just faced with challenges on a day-to-day basis and their budget and where to kind of, keep things as tight as possible. And sometimes to present some sort of a managed service plan for them, it's just a big number to swallow, even if it's not that big a number. Whereas I think that anything, like you said, over 15 people, and it's a much easier conversation for you to have with a group, because that almost comes as an expected cost to doing business. Like, yes, we have an installed base of 25 Macs or 25 Macs and PCs. We need to make sure that these, keep running and we can depend on them. And so it's almost like a built-in expectation for this managed service.
Yeah, and it's more in line with the sort of traditional model of having that happen, in-house, where you have an IT department that's controlling, the infrastructure, making decisions or advising about, the different hardware and standardizing the images and doing things that a managed services provider like Luis might do from the outside.
Luis, how big a staff do you have right now? You have 4 people?
No, it's just 2 folks, myself and my business partner, who is mostly Windows focused.
Okay, so so begs the question.
Yeah.
And again, don't take this the wrong way, but with kind of focusing on when these customers, when's a good time for them to flip their machine, some might argue the point, well, that's really micromanaging a client. So how do you find the time to get that granular with your installed bases?
I think it's just I don't send an email for every computer that falls on day 1 of the 3-year warranty having expired. I think the main focus is really to bring that to the customer's attention if there are ongoing problems with some of the hardware.
I see.
And there are situations where there's a computer that's been slow, the hard drive maybe is starting to fail, or the logic board has a problem. I see lots of iMacs, for example, that start to complain about not having enough power to run the mouse and keyboard. And in almost every situation, it's been a problem with the logic board. And so that kind of situation, I know now that I bring up with the customer, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt, hey, Mr. Customer, this computer is exhibiting the same issues that this other 3-year-old or 4-year-old computer was exhibiting. So here are your choices. As you know, I don't spend a lot of time on out of warranty hardware. I'll diagnose it remotely, and if there is an issue that I can help resolve without having to do an on-site visit, I'll do that because that's what I put in my SLA. But if I have to run around and you want me to fix a machine that's out of warranty, it will cost you additional hourly rate, and that's where I charge hourly for certain things like that. But more importantly, I think the trick for me with that granular approach to machine life cycles is to look at it as a whole and to use it as a leverage tool for budgeting more than anything else. Because I don't need to email the customer about every machine that's coming out of warranty. What I do need to do is make sure that they're budgeting for a typical 3-year life cycle of most computers. So that when I do say, hey, we have 10 computers coming out of warranty next month, can I please get a check for $20,000? It may not come as a surprise. And those are the types of surprises most people don't like to get.
And then do you include the service, like, setting up the new machine, for example, as part of your contract?
No, in fact, new hardware rollouts, anything that's a new deployment of any kind has, the hourly rate associated with it. In the case of a new machine deployment, it's actually a flat fee. I charge a flat $325 to deploy a new computer, and that may or may not include, transferring a 250 gig user home folder, or it may just be a straight up workstation that's just doing RDP to a Windows terminal server, and there may be not a lot of work involved at all. But that's what I've outlined in my managed services contract, and the customers are okay with that. Now, in most cases, if I'm deploying 10 computers at the same time, and I know I've only taken 6 hours to just put them through the NetBoot process and get them imaged and bound to the directory, I may not charge the customer the $325 per computer. That would have been $3,000 for 10 computers. I may just charge them $1,000. But that's a discretionary thing. And if it had taken me 10 hours, or 20 hours, then I can charge them because that's what we said we'd do.
Right, and that's where the trust comes in again, because you might have in the contract something that says, in this scenario, we charge by the hour, and if the customer at that time, questions it and says, really, you're going to charge me, this amount times, X number of hours every time I need a new, to replace these machines every 3 years, and you might say, well, typically we may bill it on a project basis, and this is a typical kind of estimate. Despite the contract, it's up to the customer to sort of trust you on your how reasonable you'll be when that scenario presents itself.
Yeah, and I think there's techniques to help the customer along in gaining that trust. One thing that I do very frequently is whenever I do waive fees or things like that, I absolutely put them on the invoices with a 100% discount on that line item. And I will make sure to call them and discuss, hey, listen, I just wanted you to know we just moved your Windows Server environment from being a Linux KVM virtualization environment to Windows Hyper-V, and here's the reason why. I spent 43 hours on this, which I'm not going to charge you for. I just wanted you to know that. And hello, goodbye. And there's a certain amount of trust that will build. They understand that you're doing things with their best interest in mind, and they'll be more flexible when it comes time to say, listen, I need this from you to do this project or whatever. It just becomes less of an issue over time.
So I'd like to bring this all home by asking you something. At the very beginning of our conversation, your biggest concern was having enough time in the day, enough hours to get your work done. How is it now? Better?
Absolutely, and one of the things that Alan, my dear friend, just commented about on the chat room is how not taking on too many clients is really the key to that. In a break-fix environment, when I first started, I literally had a list of 250 clients, and I could get a call from 8 of them on any given day, or none of them for 2 or 3 days in a row, and that kind of model to me was just too up and down. It just didn't provide me any kind of peace of mind. But I have currently 8 customers that are managed services customers, and I've literally put a cap on new customers. Right now, with my new business partner doing mostly Windows stuff, I'm on the sales prowl again, but mostly to gain new Windows customers. And what I find is that the value proposition is the same. It's platform agnostic. And so I still get to go out and talk to customers about their Windows networks, and I know lots about Windows now, thankfully, because I've spent some time with it. But we're going to try and build his side of the business. But I'm not taking on any new managed services customers on the Mac side, because I'd be diluting service to a point where it's unmanageable at that point. But without sharing my entire balance sheet, I'll tell you that I manage about 150 seats of Mac clients that are paying an average of $100 a month each
per seat.
Gotcha.
Per seat, yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of my main question as well, and my mind always circles back to this.
Wow.
That's
very impressive.
Pretty impressive.
Yes.
But it seems to me, and this is not to press you, Luis, in particular, but as I've been thinking about trying to transition some of my clients to this type of model, it seems like so if you circle back to the way things were when you're doing break fix, and the amount of money you were making, and the amount of clients you had to have, to make that amount of money, it seems like one of the main benefits of going to a managed services model is essentially fewer clients who are all better managed, but who you're making more money from on a client basis or user basis. Is that accurate?
I would say that's entirely accurate. As a break-fix consultant, it was run from appointment to appointment, and of 8 hours in the day, I'd spend 4 in the car. And it's just not tenable, right? The thing that is a challenge with that model is that, first of all, you can't guarantee you're going to have the work, and it's feast or famine. You have a lot of work, or there's a dry spell and the economy is a little low and people are being careful and nobody's spending. But the other thing that I found that allowed me to help customers transition is help them understand the priority of money. Because a customer will say to you, yeah, well, we don't have money at the moment. I said, well, of course you have money. The lights are on, you have people at their desks, the floors are clean. You just have to figure out what the priorities of your money are. So if you're telling me that it's more important to have this person here doing this than to grow the business to be able to make more money, then that's obviously your prerogative. But a lot of those conversations just lead into the bigger picture of what is the value proposition. I think as a break-fix consultant, and I still like doing that, I love love getting the call with a challenge with a problem that I haven't dealt with before, and testing my skills and getting the opportunity to fix it. And I like to think that I deliver value at every possible step of the way without having to charge exorbitant amounts of money. I will do little break fix engagements. Somebody will call, say, hey, we have a project we need to move. Like right now, I'm working on moving a Drupal installation from a Rackspace virtual server to a website hosted elsewhere. That's the kind of thing where I could say, it's going to cost $1,000 for me to do this project. And the customer would be like, yeah, that's, we'll make that money back in 6 months of the virtual server fees we're paying. That's worth it. But in this case, I said, listen, let's just play this by ear. I don't know how much time is going to be required. And the trust gets built in that type of scenario by just being honest about what you think it's going to take to do the work. And I think, I charge $150 an hour for break fix walk-in project fees by the hour. Sometimes more, depending on what it is. If it's a complex server issue and they want me to do it all after hours, I might say it's actually $225 an hour, $175 an hour. But yeah, without dragging on indefinitely, I think the value in going from break fix to managed services is just being able to claim back some of the time. Here's one of the big realizations I had when I went to managed services is I was trying to constantly remind myself, okay, working by the hour doesn't matter. I'm not tracking time. Tracking time is really not where I want to spend my time. And when I realized I was actually going out to visit customers, and it was not costing them anything for me to just stop by casually, say hello, answer a few questions from those users that never send a support ticket, but rather just wait until there's a problem. It just allows me to build that continuous sort of expectation of, hey, Luis is around. He always answers our questions. And I would never charge anything right now to those customers for that site visit. I might even go and plant myself in the boardroom for a whole day and work from their office. And that means they can ask me questions. I can spend a bunch of time with them, and it just builds value and trust. And those are the kinds of things that I love to do that allow me to not have to watch the clock or the customer to watch the clock. And they get tremendous value from that.
And I guess even if you were watching the clock, you're still doing better than you were before when you were charging hourly.
Absolutely. I think, it's just, I don't even think that way. I try to think that I don't think that way. And I try to position myself into, okay, I'm not hourly. I simply, the value is in a monthly fee, and they may be quiet for 2 or 3 months. But if they know that I'm there and I'm making regular visits, and there's not this disassociation from the value, which can happen, and I've seen that happen before, where customers like, we're not sure what we're paying you for. They don't know anything that goes on the back end. So there's little techniques that I use, like I'll send incident reports. Hey, we had, there was a drive that failed on the server. It was replaced under warranty. It all happened 3 days ago. You never noticed because I'm so great at my job.
Right.
And so those kinds of things can often help build the trust and value with the customer.
But I guess the reason I'm sort of fixated on this is on the front end when I'm actually pitching this to what may be a break fix client. Thinking from the perspective of a lot of other consultants and myself in particular. How do you? Let's say I have a 20-seat client who's currently hiring us to be responsive, and they pay us hourly. Maybe we visit them every couple months as sort of a preventive maintenance kind of visit. How do you then pitch a managed services, contract, and how do you transition to it? It seems like when you're comparing the value, inevitably the client will go and say, well, looks like I spent, X amount over the last, 6 months or a year, on my technology consulting services with this company. And now they want to charge me X times 1.5 or something like that.
I think there's a good opportunity to have like an in-between transitionary type of arrangement. And let me describe what that looks like, because I did this with 1 or 2 clients that never really were able to grasp the value of it initially, and then finally got the point and understood where the value was. But let's say I have 100 break fix clients, and none of them are paying anything monthly, but rather they call regularly. I think this is where what good time tracking will be useful in the case of break fix, and be able to approach the customer and say, okay, Mr. Customer, you have spent an average of $400 per month with me for the last 3 years. What would you say if I told you we could do a retainer for you for the same $400 that would allow me to be a little bit more proactive with a couple of things, maybe just the server, not every single workstation, for example, maybe the server, and then allow us to do a little bit more strategy on some of your long-term business goals and seeing where the technology is going. And then also look after, the normal things that we've been looking after at an hourly rate. And I think in most cases, customers would be okay with that, considering that you're presenting them with, real data. Okay, this is what we spent. We're not going to be spending anything different. But it just allows them to move into that mentality of the value proposition of value-based fees as opposed to an hourly rate. That's the most complex part to switch away from, is the hourly rate and the attachment to what I'm paying for is this guy to be here for X amount of time, as opposed to what I'm paying for is for this guy to deliver this end result or this end product for us so we can move forward with the business. And so those are little transitionary techniques that can help somebody move from that very, very time-consuming break fix into starting to charge a minimal amount that helps the customer move away from that hourly rate thought process.
That's an interesting way to think about it, as a retainer, equivalent to the sort of average monthly cost, prior to then.
And I think there needs to be a little bit of compromise as a consultant. You need to be willing to give up a little bit in order to help the customer transition. I don't think they're going to magically trust that every dollar they're going to spend with you going forward will be worthwhile, because they haven't really seen that value yet. They haven't experienced that service. In the Windows world, it's very interesting because a lot of the businesses come from that model. And so most of the customers I go see are leaving one contract because they just don't like the provider and are expecting to go into another managed services contract. And that's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. But that's not been traditionally the way that Mac businesses, especially on the smaller side, operate. And that's the challenge.
And I guess another possible technique is to coincide your managed services offering with a rate increase. So, across the board, you're planning to raise your rates anyway, and you offer managed services as an alternative, which is more equivalent to the old rate. So it's a way for clients to continue at the old rate effectively, but also transition to your new preferred model and way of working with them.
Yeah, I've heard people do that also. Another thing I've heard people do is to raise their rate by $1 per month for the next year. And so interestingly, they obviously don't notice that. But it gives you a very long window of opportunity to say, Mr. Customer, we're going to be increasing our rate by $12 by the end of the year. We'd like to keep you on, and hopefully this won't affect our relationship. Here's an opportunity to lock in at X rate for X number of years if you wanted to sign a managed services agreement, or even just a retainer if it was sort of a transitionary retainer, to get them to flip over to that mentality of value-based fees. That's
awesome. Well, Luis, this has been a great discussion. I want to sort of cut it short here because we're just over an hour. We've been trying to stick to an hour. It's been tough because these conversations are so interesting, and this one in particular with managed services comparing to break fix and so on. But it's been great to have you on, and thanks a lot for doing it.
Yeah, I think there also might be an opportunity to have you come back at some point, and maybe we could pick up where we left off, and even do a little bit more of a deep dive. But this has been tremendous.
Thanks so much, guys. I mean, I'm learning about it every day, and I find that the biggest thing that I've learned through all this experience with getting into managed services agreements is unless I can build trust with the customer, I just can't get to any stage of a managed services agreement, period. And sometimes that trust is built very quickly. Sometimes it takes 3 meetings or having provided service for a number of months or years. But regardless of the amount of time it takes, it really just depends on whether you're delivering value for the service and whether the customer detects that you're transparent with your fees and transparent with your approach to consulting, and that's what matters.
Good advice, Luis. And by the way, great URL. ook.co is where you guys can find Luis and his current company, Ook Enterprises. And I did the research. I actually wasn't sure how to pronounce it, but I understand it kind of refers back to your Monkey Mac consulting. So it's Ook, the sound of a monkey.
Yeah. my little monkey obsession I've got going on.
Luis,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Before you go, you want to put in a plug for your music?
No. Well, maybe two plugs then. The music. No, you can find me on iTunes. I have a couple of albums. I do a little jazz singing. I've done it professionally for many years, and so before I moved into the IT field, where there's definitely more leverage for my time. But also, I'm developing a web app that I'll release in October with the Web Summit in Dublin. Which aims to resolve the long-standing challenge of sharing client information back with the clients. And this is, again, speaking to the transparency I have with clients. I have this web app in production for myself currently, but we're turning it into a multi-tenant system. It allows me to create client containers, and I can add devices, add passwords, add files and documents and notes and things like that. I can create accounts for the customer to come and review their data at any time. It also allows me to create subcontractor named access. So if I want to give a subcontractor access to a specific server or a specific device that they're going to work on for me, then I can do that without giving them access to the entire client container. So it's called Monkeybox, and so therein lies the rub with my monkey obsession.
Excellent.
Now, sorry, could you just describe that again? So, just briefly, Monkeybox. So, it's what kind of access does it provide to your clients exactly? Is it data? It's a way of storing network information and passwords and things, or?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Okay.
we all use some kind of password management, whether it's LastPass or 1Password or Keychain or iCloud Keychain in the future of 10.9.
Or sticky notes.
Or sticky notes or Evernote or Dropbox or Confluence or a number of tools that people sort of mishmash into one way of tracking all the information they normally need to keep for a client. The challenge for me has always been that works fine on your own as a one-man band, but as soon as you need to share that info, you're always having to piecemeal the data. But more importantly, there's no way to also in one place give the customer access to it so that they can also review and have access to their passwords. One of the biggest gripes customers have with service providers is that they feel they're being held hostage by their provider. And so they'll say, well, why don't I have access to any of my passwords? I want to have access to my passwords. But it's data that's changing constantly. So it's really hard to just give them a copy and then expect that to be updated.
So true.
So Monkeybox just aims to centralize that. It's essentially a sharing app, if you will, but it focuses a little bit more on structured data. So I can actually create device records. I can associate a password or a file or an attachment with a device. I can give specific users specific access to certain passwords. I can also track expiry dates for service contracts that send email notifications. Hey, your domain renewal is coming up, or hey, the service contract for that SonicWall or Meraki router, what have you, is coming up. And more importantly, if I'm sleeping at 3 a.m. and a customer needs access to their DNS provider for whatever reason, because they found Office 365 and they want to sign up for the trial, they need access to their DNS and they can't reach me, guess what? They can now log into Monkeybox against all reasonable recommendation from me to grab their DNS credentials and go and plug them in and get access to it.
That really sounds like the holy grail that I was personally looking for. One of our first episodes, I think we touched on it. How
we did.
It's much easier to share, among. So I can use 1Password and keep all my client data. Personally, it's great. I keep it in secure notes and things like that. But to be able to share it with my staff as well as clients, like you mentioned, you want to be able to give clients access to their own data without having certainly to email passwords. You can put a file on the server, but you have to maintain it. You have to keep it up to date. I mean, it's if they have a server. So this sounds like a great solution. Is this available yet, or is this still in beta?
Not quite. It's I'm using it in production for my business, but it's not set up for multi-tenant yet. So it doesn't allow me to create unique containers for other subscriptions. For example, you can't subscribe to have your own client container that nobody else can see. So at the moment, people have been wanting to try it, and I've been giving them a client container with an account that only has access to that client with the forewarning that I would have access to anything they create in that. So they were just creating, test passwords and test devices. But it allows me to do things like upload a SPX file from System Profiler to create a device automatically, and just it allows me to centralize a lot of that data. So I'm happy to set up some of those demo accounts. They're not, again, full demo accounts. They're just a client container that I potentially have access to for people that want to try it and see if it's something that be interest to them to use as a tool for their business.
So what's your release date? Just
I think
Joe is very excited.
So the release date right now, we'll probably soft launch way before end of October, more likely end of August. But we're going to try and do an official release around the Web Summit that's happening in Ireland at the end of October. I actually applied with Monkeybox to become part of their Alpha program, which is a sponsored booth in which startups can come and showcase their app to this big conference. And so I got selected. So I was super happy about that. And I get to come to Dublin and showcase my app in their big conference and attend the conference as well. So we're going to try and marry that with the official launch date of Monkeybox. But we'll probably be soft launching by end of August.
That sounds absolutely awesome. And by the way, that question was for Alan Hancock in the chat room. He said never announce a release date. So end of October it is.
Well, and Alan would know, yes. I almost feel guilty that I'm saying any dates. I'm using very relative dates. I should use like UTC time or just, late August, early October, somewhere around there.
Or as Apple says, fall. So
yeah, in the fall.
Oh.
No, but the good news is I am using it in production. So it is a system that's already up and running. It's already in very, very nice Rackspace infrastructure. It's just a matter of developing the bit that allows separate subscriptions, and so that's what we're working on at the moment.
Gotcha. That sounds great. Awesome. Well, keep us posted, and we'll certainly, put a link in. We'll talk after we go off the air, but we'll put a link in the show notes for this episode. A couple of the things I wanted to mention. So you guys can find us on Twitter. Our handle is CMDCTRLPWR. Of course, you can find us at commandcontrolpower.com as well, and use a contact form there to get in touch with us. Also, we've got T-shirts, which are available through Teespring, a really great sort of launch platform for T-shirts. But it means that they only ship if we reach our goal of, in this case, 25 shirts. We're at 8 out of 25, and we've got just over 2 days remaining. So basically, get your orders in today, tomorrow, or early on the next day.
And my grandma bought 2 of the 8, so.
Is that right?
Yeah, so.
Nana's got 2? Awesome.
I was wondering who bought those. So we'd really appreciate the support, guys. It's not a huge money-making opportunity. We just want our shirts, so.
Yeah, that's what I want.
This is a first edition shirt, because the next one that comes out, Joe's going to change it. So,
It's going to be way different.
When Joe's famous in 5 years, you're going to have the first shirt that he put out. So,
yeah, you should start just selling shares in Command Control Power. That's what you do.
Nice. So that means you, Kim, Alan, Mike, Brad. I see you guys listening. You got to buy shirts now.
Oh yeah, hey, we got a new shout out here to Brad Clare. He said he's been listening since the beginning. He just hasn't posted yet. So thanks for your support, guys. Everybody, it's been great.
And Grandma, thank you for
Jerry's grandma. Thank you.
And I'm gonna throw a personal plug because I am now on Twitter and I have more tweets than followers, so I got to do something about that. I am Sam Valencia at I am Sam Valencia. Follow me.
Follow Sam, and you can find him through our site as well. But this has been really fun, and we're looking forward to continuing. This is our 10th episode, so that's a little bit of a milestone. I'm glad we did. I did 3-digit placeholders in the unit number there. So hopefully we'll have 10 or 100 more. So keep listening. Tune in every Tuesday. I think it's going to be pretty much every Tuesday at 8:30. You guys comfortable with that? Here we do another live calendar check here. This is a tradition as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to be in San Francisco for a gig.
Here we go.
But I will. I'll make something happen.
Well, next Tuesday's
Awesome.
a new moon, so we'll coordinate it and look for the website. Look on the website to see the updated schedule. But pretty much almost every Tuesday, I think 8:30, you guys can tune in live and obviously subscribe on iTunes. And Jerry, is that slot still available for the first reviewer on iTunes?
Yeah, we need a comment, good, bad, or indifferent. And Luis, we got to have you back after you come back from Dublin and talk about Monkeybox.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd love to. And thanks for the honor, guys. I really appreciate it. I've always really loved having these types of conversations. I think I always get great ideas from other people. And, as you described at the beginning of our conversation, we may have not been live yet, but we are friendly a community, and I think we just need to continue to foster that. And you guys doing this podcast is just a great example of that. So thanks for all the efforts to keep this going.
Well, it's our pleasure. It's been great fun and a great way to give back to the community. And happy to have all you guys out there listening and gals. And thanks again. And tune in next week.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.